Welcome, everyone, to this virtual ACES webinar and chat. And I'm Mary Lucy. It's a delight to have you with us. And I know that we'll have some others anxious to watch this recording. So today I'm excited. We're going to talk about transdisciplinarity and engagement. And this is going to be led by Lou Swanson, formerly, or still in Colorado, but was in major leadership for engagement at Colorado State University. And similarly, Scott Reed, who was in major leadership at Oregon State University for engagement. And the unique part of both of their roles is that it was an integrated program between their land grant extension and the rest of the university. We also have Renee Wallace, who's been working with them on this, as some of this is emerging out of our work around strategic doing. And let's just have the other two people very briefly introduce themselves, and then we're going to turn this over to the trio. So Suzanne and then Cornell.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Morse-Mumon. I'm the president of ACES, but also on the faculty of the University of Virginia. Welcome.
Everyone, I'm Cornell. Apologies for no webcam. I just got into my hotel room. I've come out of a graduation ceremony of a private university where I'm on the board. I'm Cornell Hart. I'm a member of ACES, and I'm based at the University of the Western Cape, South Africa, responsible for community engagement and the monitoring and evaluation of the societal impact of community engagement and scholarship of engagement of all the staff at the university.
It's great to have you, Cornell. I know we've got a little bit of a time difference. So with this, I'm going to mute, turn this over to Lou, Scott, and Renee, and the show is theirs.
Thank you, Mary. I'll kick it off. I've really looked forward to this coffee hour in order to share some thoughts and, more importantly, get some feedback from all of you. I'm Scott Reed. My background is as a forester and an economist. I have experience at 3 U.S. land-grant universities, Michigan State University, University of Minnesota, and Oregon State University, across all of the university mission areas. Interestingly, I discovered community engagement while I was working in the private sector in Minnesota. I was responsible for forestry research for a big land management company, and I had more problems than I knew what to do with. And I learned that the university there, my land grant university, could provide expertise and graduate students and research study design that I didn't have. I provided problems that they didn't have, and we did things together that have governed kind of the rest of my career. The last position I held, from which I retired in 2019, was Vice Provost of Outreach and Engagement and Director of the Extension Service at Oregon State University. Lou?
No, thank you, Scott. So I'm somewhat similar to Scott. Now start from my last appointment and then move backwards. So I was the Vice President for Engagement at Colorado State University, and like Oregon State, our engagement office was campus-wide. We worked with all of the colleges plus Extension, and I reported to myself as Director of Extension for a good portion of that time. But what got me interested in engagement was I used to be Peace Corps volunteer in North Africa and Tunisia on a project over 2.5 years that failed. It did everything really well. It followed the outline, and what it failed at was community engagement. And so I was served as a faculty. I got my master's degree at NC State and my PhD at Penn State, and was at the University of Kentucky for 17 years before coming to CSU as chair of the Department of Sociology. So I'm a rural sociologist, and it was late in my career that I became involved directly with engagement at a land-grant university as a VP. So Scott and I knew each other quite well over at least 13 years and have been working, and when we're working together, and we've been working together since our retirement, joint retirements in 2019. So Renee?
Hi, good day, everyone. I am Renee V. Wallace. I am a serial entrepreneur. So I practice systems process and change work. Doers Edge is the organization that I founded in 1989 and began my work primarily around process work and doing strategic initiatives and special projects, and have been doing that work for quite some time across a number of different industries, large systems like school systems, hospital systems, retail operations, and things of that nature. So did that for a really long time, working primarily in corporate environments and entrepreneurial environments. And the last 15 years or so, I began doing deeper work directly in community. I started a nonprofit called Food Plus Detroit, and that brought me deeper into connection with the work that's really happening at the ground level with us as individuals. It also brought me into work closely with the academies. And in that experience, because I come from a work of systems, process, and change, accustomed to working with a variety of people. But I found often when you do work, I noticed in community spaces and in academic spaces, there were gaps in how engagement actually occurred. And that's been a mystery to me. And it's also a challenge that I've taken on to see how do we do a better job with that, because we have so much opportunity. And that's how I ended up hanging out with Scott and Lou. We have a common interest in seeing work be done in a transdisciplinary way and also to do deeper societal engagement. So we're really glad that you joined us here today for this conversation. We're going to share some concepts with you, and followed by some comments. I'll wear my community hat, and then we're going to open it up for the rest of you here today to join into the conversation with us. Thank you for being here.
So Renee, can we get the slides up?
Oh, I thought they were showing. Is that showing?
Yeah, mine was showing.
Oh, mine's
I
not.
thought- Oh, okay. Well, let me try it again because they were showing.
Okay, maybe my computer.
Okay, I'll try it again. Are you seeing it now?
Nope.
Yes.
Yes.
Huh. Okay, so I must have done something wrong here, but I've actually got the slides in front of me.
Okay.
And I'll try to follow it on my other computer. I don't know why. Okay, it was up earlier when
Well,
we
we'll
were
just
practicing.
signal next slide and
Yep.
you'll have them, your deck.
Okay, so the where we are going to begin is just briefly discuss transdisciplinarity, scholarship, and societal engagement. First of all, transdisciplinary is an academic term, characterized by the academic disciplines at universities and throughout the world. And so when we talk about transdisciplinary, we're talking about more than just a single discipline like sociology or forestry. And why we're interested in this is because of the big pictures, whether it's climate change, pandemics, and just horrible poverty throughout the world, and economic development at both the global and social level of the community. These two separate identities need to be connected at the hip between university scholarship and societal engagement. So we need to integrate academic and societal knowledge, and we need to focus on real world complex problems that are both generated by the community's interest as well as the faculty and students are core to this process. So it involves collaboration among academic institutions with societal stakeholders, and we're all quite familiar that society and community members trying to have access to higher education globally can be rather difficult. So we need to build integrative and sustainable bridges. And this is why we're focusing on both transdisciplinary scholarship and societal engagement. Scott?
That's a good stage set, Lou. Thank you. For today, we've broken the subject into 11 features. Lou and I will alternate reviewing the basic elements of each very briefly. That will be followed then by Renee as a respondent. And the number one is holistic problem definition. Lou said this, sometimes these problems are called wicked problems. They have other labels, of course, ambiguous, or one of my favorites, ill-defined social messes. But they're not easy to address is the key point there. Problems are difficult to solve because they have many dimensions. There's a lack of clear boundaries, incomplete knowledge, and significant economic and other burdens. There's a clear potential for unintended consequences. Thirdly, there's a wide range of stakeholders with diverse perspectives, values, priorities. This can lead to wide disagreements and conflict over desired outcomes and solutions. Next slide.
Okay, so the next one goes back to my earlier statements about integration of academic disciplines. We need to look at this holistically. So we need to merge perspectives from multiple academic fields, and that's not easy to do within the academy, where we are very locally focused in terms of our research and our promotion and tenure processes. But we need to break down these silos. Now, silos is a North American concept of a large circular structure that holds grain. And I remember in the Soviet Union, they used it as talking about missile silos. But it means that these are hardened walls that need to be broken through to have collaborative research, teaching, and engagement. So we need to do that to have shared frameworks, and we need common conceptual languages. And there's a lot of work to do here, working both from community perspectives and their language and their understanding of their worlds, and working to make our worlds of each of our academic disciplines understandable and integrated with each other and with communities. Scott?
Number 3 is stakeholder engagement. By actively involving community members, policymakers, industry, and of course there are many stakeholders, can help lead to more complete understanding of the implications of an issue. Mutual trust and respect is built by working on problems together. And thirdly, to recognize and use experiential knowledge is important. After all, indigenous knowledge born by living an issue is a legitimate perspective. Such local knowledge adds to that generated by the experimental research. Next slide.
So the fourth slide is co-creation of knowledge. And what this refers to is that there's a common enterprise for community engagement with the universities to work. And we need collaborative research processes. And a simple way of looking at this is when a sociologist studies a community or a sociologists study a community, the community needs to share authorship because they are co-creating the research base. And while this creates some problems within academic circles about who gets credit, it's important that community members are part of the process of research. That knowledge has to be produced with our community stakeholders. And this is not a top-down process. In other words, we have to have a bottom-up or a horizontal integration between community knowledge and academic knowledge. And in doing so, this serves to increase the relevance of the questions and how we're explaining them, and the ability to translate that to communities in understandable ways and reverse back to our students and faculty. And one of the consequences for doing this, the benefit of doing this, is that not only is it relevant, but it creates the legitimacy of the findings by both community members and within the academy. Scott?
Great. Number 5 considers the action orientation and need for solutions. This is something that Renee has staked a lot of her work on, and I'm sure that we will hear about an action focus later. But an emphasis on real-world application and impact isn't grounded in hypothetical circumstances, but issues that people care about. And these issues are often linked to other issues, that sort of illustrates the complexity. Change is driven through policy, practice, and innovation, but driving those often involves uncertainty and risk, requires explanation of alternatives and consequences as we go forward. And finally, to focus on social relevance means solutions aren't simply right or wrong, but they're judged based upon their effectiveness and their impact on various stakeholders. Lou.
Okay, number 6, iterative and reflexive processes. Two nice big words that for communities to understand, but more importantly for the academy, for students and faculty. This needs to be a continuous learning and reevaluation process. That's the iterative process. It needs to be reflexive. We need to really think about the values that we share and don't share, and how they drive different ways of seeing the problem from different perspectives, and the importance of thinking about how to integrate those so that people, while they may disagree, at least have a better understanding of where other members of this community and academic engagement process occurs. We need to adapt methodologies and goals as our understandings deepen. In other words, we need to take a look at all the ways in which science, as well as our knowledge within communities, which is also rationally created, how we go about understanding the world around us, our social and environmental worlds, and bringing a common understanding together. And that's the reflexivity on roles, powers, and assumption. We need to understand that in communities as well as in universities, there are power differentials that are often can elbow their way into our discussions and disrupt the possibilities for community. It's hard to do this, especially probably for a full professor like me, who's been out there as an authority to learn that communities are also authorities on these issues. So we need to keep in mind this an iterative process, and it's a reflective process. Scott?
Communication across diverse audiences means value is found in multiple places. Thus, you need to use the findings that need to be interpreted in order to be understood by a variety of audiences. Use accessible language and formats assists with universal access to developing knowledge. I mean, I'm intrigued by the concept of, for example, digital curb cuts. As we begin to use electronic work more and more often, how can we deliberately use our digital language to be available to all equally? And finally, communication is not one way. Understanding is enhanced through dialogue and learning about others' perspectives. Lou?
Okay, the next one, number 8, is ethical considerations. And here's where the humanities, in particular at universities, can play important roles, as well as helping facilitate discussions with communities. Again, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, we need to make sure we understand the power dynamics that may be and probably are in play. We need to think about consent. We can't just assume that people in the room are willing to give up their identities and their knowledge without reciprocality on the part of the other participants. We need to respect the cultural norms and community's autonomy. Scott and I are former directors of Extension. We know how important respect of cultural norms, whether we agree with them or not, or they agree with us, that it's important to understand these cultural norms that shape the way we think about ourselves and others, as well as community autonomy. And finally, really importantly, we need to ensure transparency and accountability. You can't just go in and say, well, here's our findings and leave and not help people understand in a transparent way how those findings were created, what were the biases and assumptions that the researchers brought to bear, and also the accountability for the work. And the same is true for our communities. We need to ensure transparency within the communities as they work with the universities, and we need to think about accountability. And in dealing with transdisciplinarity and community engagement, these ethical considerations are paramount and must be attended. Scott?
Number 9 is systems thinking, which is something that has always challenged me because it forces me to think in a bigger way than I would by myself, where problems are analyzed within broader systems. The focus is on interconnectedness and relationships among parts of a problem rather than isolating them. Understanding the interdependencies and feedback loops recognizes that systems are dynamic and the components interact over time. And finally, recognizing unintended consequences and leverage points. By mapping these relationships and tracing downstream impacts, systems thinking can reveal consequences that could go unseen, allowing for mitigation of negative outcomes and development of adaptive strategies. Lou.
So number 10, flexible methodologies. Again, this was alluded to earlier, but we need to give more attention. So first, we need to combine qualitative and quantitative methods from the social sciences and humanities. Qualitative methods seem to be a little softer and squishy, but when done correctly, they can bring an incredible amount of rich information through observation. Quantitative, I'm a quantitative rural sociologist. I'm a demographer by training. I like data, but data has its own biases and its own interpretive process. But key here is the third one on the list, which is participatory approaches. This is different from qualitative and quantitative. This is learning how to work through both qualitative and quantitative interactions between a community and researchers, and allows a participatory interpretation and questioning and final outcomes and some solutions, or at least new paths towards doing something different. So we need to make sure also that these methods are based on context and on stakeholder input. Easy said, hard to do, because we're not always sure of what all the different contexts that may be in place in any particular university and community engagement. And stakeholder input, if you start leaving people out, they know it, they will leave. The same is true for faculty. If they feel they're not involved, if they're peripheral or their students are, that will collapse the collaboration. We need to be sure we look at the context and the stakeholder inputs. And finally, we need to innovate to meet diverse needs. The local communities, the academy itself, faculty and students, we're all so different. I mean, incredible diversity on both sides, the community and the academic sides. We need to innovate and not leave out diverse perspectives and voices. Those voices are in society and they are important. And the same as with our student and faculty voices. We need to innovate. We need not to be afraid of diversity. We need to engage it and build on it, because it's going to be one of the great strengths of an outcome for faculty and students and for communities as they engage. Scott?
And finally, our 11th feature is all about learning to be better through education and capacity building. Here we consider training scholars and practitioners in collaborative skills that include the dynamics of teamwork and facilitation. Knowledge development builds upon itself through skills in human interaction, learning not only about an issue, but about working together on the issue. The result is to build capacity within communities and institutions for doing this difficult transdisciplinary work. And thirdly, fostering long-term partnerships and shared learning recognizes that relationships are built and strengthened by working effectively together. So that's our 11 points. Let me offer kind of a wrap-up and a conclusion. Next slide, Renee. Transdisciplinary scholarship, as I hope that we've illustrated, is dynamic, inclusive, and impactful. And importantly, I would add, it's socially responsible. It requires humility, openness, and commitment to societal change driven by human creativity. And finally, it's vital for addressing today's wicked problems, or however you want to label the problems that we are seeking to work on. Note I didn't say solve problems. There's a principle in this work that's called the no stopping principle that really depends upon incremental progress. You just don't stop and declare success. And a final point I would make, and it's not a bullet here, but Lou and I, as former university faculty members, we would remind everyone to remember our students. Students are assets of the university, and they are residents of our communities and can be very useful in order both to understand and utilize in a meaningful way. So that wraps up kind of the Lou and Scott presentation. I'd really look forward to Renee's thinking as a respondent to these thoughts.
Yeah, well, first, let me acknowledge that I deeply appreciate the work that you and Lou are doing, that Scott and Lou are doing in bringing this forward in this manner. There's a lot of rigor in the things that you talked about and things that I have deep appreciation for. You know, being able to take a look at the complex issues that we're facing, you know, in our community requires all of us. All of the dimensions that you talked about, the social implications, the environmental implications, the economics, all of those things are important, and none of us can do this by ourselves. You know, there is not one single discipline that can stand and attempt to answer all of these things and to bring about and generate ideas to move us toward better outcomes by themselves. So we have to merge our perspectives. We have to come to the table with diversity of thought, you know, diverse mindsets, diverse experiences, and people being able to come to the table. And as we come to the table and we do that, it gives us those opportunities to create some shared language. You know, as we talk with one another, using words and understanding what they mean to each other and being able to develop a language that we can speak and people in the room all understand each other. And that takes patience. That takes some humility, huge doses of humility, by the way, because we all have to step back and have a deep regard for the other in the conversation. And to do that, when we talk about engaging, all of us have parts to play in these things. So when I think about it from a community perspective, I always think about the community leaders as who initiates. Not all of these issues or opportunities are initiated coming out of the academy. I've been an instigator of a few, hanging out with my friends from the academy. So there may be times when not only is it about actively involving the community, it's about operating as co-equals and being able to do the work with both leadership coming from both the academy as well as the community. Because sometimes it initiates in one place or the other. Sometimes there's this collaborative thing that's happening and we decide to do a work together. So to me, actively involved means taking a look at the roles, taking a look, one, who initiated, taking a look at the roles that people choose, because people have different capacities, right? And being able to take the time and to explore the levels at which people would be engaged. I totally agree that, you know, the genius lies in both places. The genius lies in living life and experiencing things and problems and solving them in the realm of where you live. And then in the academy, you get the tools and other things that allow you to go into this work. And being able to bring those together, you're going to have opportunities to learn from one another and to co-create answers that you couldn't do in either place, or better answers than you could if you were operating independently. A couple of other things I'll say, because there was so much here that I totally agree with and would echo, that we do take a look at power. A lot of times people don't recognize the impact or the power imbalances or differentials that are occurring, whether it's from professors to students and community leaders to residents and across those as well, and really pay attention to how we're interacting, with one another and making sure that we're acting in respect and regard, but then also recognizing that that power and authority happens everywhere. And I think, Lou, when you called out the fact that there's authority in community as well, that needs to be emphasized and brought to bear as well. A couple other quick things. I love systems thinking. It's all about connecting those dots and really getting, stepping out and back a bit so that you can see the systems. People don't think systems. We live in them, but until we visualize them and we talk about them, we draw pictures of them, we connect the dots for people verbally, we don't see the systems. And so I could pull this thread over here and somebody's pants could fall off way over there and we don't understand how that happened because we don't. So we have to really get into systems, not only systems thinking, but doing in systems. So I strongly agree with that. And I'll close out with looking at the methodologies, we have to be flexible and adaptive. We live in a very dynamic world, right? So we can start out with ideas about how we want to do something, and we're going to learn along the way. And we also should take the time when we're starting out to make sure that we're choosing methods that we can agree to learn together, because sometimes, you know, you're going to start with people with more experience in some than others, but that whatever methods that we choose, they need to be contextualized to where we are so that people see the benefit in those methods and they can build the skills also in carrying out those methods. Last word that I'll zero in on is participatory. I have worked with a number of folks in a variety of different disciplines, and we can talk about collaboration. People like to use that word, but often people don't really go into the deeper depths of what does it mean to design something in a participatory way and taking into account the various different people, the roles that they play, the commitments that they make, and then being able to attend to that throughout a process from beginning to end. So I'll close there. And what we'd like to do now that we've had the opportunity to kind of lay a foundation and to begin the discussion, and thank you all for the opportunity to begin the discussion, we'd like to open the conversation up to the rest who are here and to begin to hear from you what some of your thoughts are. So I'm going to give it back to Lou and Scott, and you all can begin to engage folk in this conversation.
Go ahead, Scott, you can facilitate.
Okay, thanks. Oh, Mary has something.
I just want to comment, and I know that both Suzanne and Cornell operate in the same world that I spent so many years in at a university level, working in community development, but in the very practical aspects of it. And so much of these 11 tenets have a lot of crossover to to really good quality community development, whether you're operating at a nonprofit in a community from a university, but not all of it's mutual, but there's certainly plenty of overlap, and really good community development is using many of these same principles. And if a university is not involved, you still have so many of these aspects. So I just couldn't help but notice that, and it's very well done. And the core principles of community development is often viewed in North America, but even those that are laid out more internationally, as well as the whole UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I know Cornell is very well versed in those. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I'd offer a comment and something that's impacted me over my career, and that is early I was taught that as an academic, I could do a needs assessment and a situational analysis in order to understand a situation or an issue. And I now feel very incomplete about doing that because I'm only one person, one mind, one set of experiences, and I bring my biases into analysis. And so I'm now wondering what a better approach is in order to systematically understand wicked issues in order to work on the most important things. And I don't have the answer to that, but I'm sort of confused and conflicted by how to effectively use real-time data in order to make real-time action decisions. I mean, I don't know. Renee, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's you bring an interesting point. And I want to comment on something, that Mary said about overlaps, crossovers. I think one of the things that we'll see when we talk about being transdisciplinary in an approach, that there will be elements that we know cross over and carry over from discipline to discipline. And being able to understand, when I say tomato, do you mean tomato? And are we talking the same thing, although we're saying the same words? And so being able to get inside of that and understand how different disciplines maybe applying a particular way of seeing something and working is important, because I may think I understood what you were saying, but then when we get ready to do something, it's like, wait a minute, So I think those are those opportunities for us to say, this sounds like we have something in common. Let's talk about this thing and get, even greater clarity about, what we mean. And to your point, Scott, about, being able to use tools and do things independently. As a consultant, I've been a consultant forever now. So it's always, how do you take the perspective and come with your knowledge that you bring? But then also what I found over time is I'm always looking for people, across the board in organizations and in projects to get insights from. Even if I am developing the thing and they're expecting me to develop the thing, I never develop anything by myself. So I'm always looking for someone and some perspectives and some insights that are directly related to the thing that we're dealing with, not necessarily from what I learned from someplace else, but I'm talking to people, along the way. So we may not be in the same room always working it out, but I'm bringing their voices, and their perspectives into the room with me when I'm working alone.
Great, thank you, Blue.
Yeah, so I would like to hear from Cornell. I like the thumbs up, but I'd like to also hear what you have to say. But two really quick things that I think tie into what Renee is saying, and that is there's very few axioms in sociology, but one of them is a way of seeing is a way of not seeing, and it is hard to know what you don't know. And what Renee is referring to is how communities in the academy can learn what they don't know in a better way and a more constructive way. The second point is that Scott and I have a colleague, Hannah Love, who's here in Fort Collins. She works on developing teamwork, and the importance of teamwork and facilitating teamwork is critical for transdisciplinary discussions on wicked issues at the community, within communities and within the academy. You have to learn how to work in teams, and you have to learn how to reward teams. And in many cases, you need to come out with outcomes that may be conflicting, but you have to allow the voice to emerge. So Cornell, do you have anything to say? Sorry to pick on you late at night.
If you weren't, I was going to, from her introduction.
No, I think it's very valuable points that's been brought across. And I think one of the most important things that we sometimes not acknowledge, even with those of us who work with community voice and work on an inclusive approach, I think is a power dynamic. And most importantly, the minute you work in partnership for co-creation, one needs to create safe spaces for people to put their so-called agenda on the table. And I've often worked with this even in happy communities, not just in the conflicting communities. Because if you think about it, whenever anybody goes to an event, never mind planning or workshops, we each go with something in mind on what's in it for me. I want something out of it. It's like tonight. Each one of us connected with a common purpose, but individually we want something specific for ourselves. And it's creating a space where the individual can get what they want, but collectively move forward for what everybody wants. And so I think that's important. It's what you also mentioned now, Lo, that in sociology we do speak of, what's said and what's not really said. So I really, really enjoyed the points that you've raised tonight and in the presentation, because I think each one of those slides can actually become a brainstorming issue that needs to be unpacked. For me, all of them are actually themes that can be further developed. So well done to all of you. It was really well done. Thanks.
Thanks, Cornell. And I just want to point to this over my shoulder. I don't know where you see this, where it says behind me on this poster,
does your-
what does your next look like? And the reason why the YOUR is as it is to your very point, Cornell. It's the
Yeah.
Y and then the OUR. So we're always acknowledging that you have an individual interest. Nobody's denying that, but we have the bigger interest, yours and ours. And the thing is to acknowledge that and not expect people to always set aside their self-interest, because that's what got them in the room and to the table. And
Yeah.
they have something to bring from that perspective. And so thank you for calling that out. I would like you to also address a little bit in your introduction. You talked about societal impacts, in your work, that you have, been able to kind of hone in on the societal impacts of scholarship, engagement. Would you say a little bit about that?
Yes, we've developed a web portal that you can have access to. Not all of the data is available to people outside of UWC, but the principle of the model that I've developed is it's based on Boyer's model of the different types of scholarships. But we define community not just as civil society. So we speak of it, and I liked in the presentation the issue around the wealth of contribution, access, information that comes from our student community. So we have student community, government community, corporate and business community, the scholarly community, faculty, and then civil society. And then what I've done was to take the OECD well-being indicators, and so we use those 12 well-being indicators that's clustered in 5 dimensions. And we cluster them also in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals. Depending on which African country you are in, you link it to your country plan. And so for faculty at a university, if you look at universities, we're actually made up in those 12 well-being indicators. So it's very easy then to do spider graphs in the end, where you capture which communities you work in, what aspects you are attending, and a baseline profile that the community does and give. So we sometimes do social mapping, other times we do what we call well-being dimension mapping that communities do through dialogue and group discussions. And from there on, faculty then start saying, what is it that they can contribute? One of the things we do in these workshops is to ask community members who's not in the room, not who's in the room. Because it's the ones who's not in the room that sometimes a dynamic issue or it's an oversight. And so the societal impact is then measured around what shifts in those well-being dimensions. So you can do it either at a macro level and just work with the 5 well-being dimensions, or you can work with the 12 indicators that it's made up of. And we use it so that communities drive their own change. And it's what Scott also mentioned tonight about, how do you use the right language that everybody can contribute? So the OECD well-being dimensions are easy to understand, but the reporting and the statistical analysis isn't. And so, although it's a micro tool, we've now developed it into a Google form where communities and children and everyone can participate, and it's at a micro level, because all countries through their statistician generals must report to the World Bank and the UN on the well-being dimensions. But they do it with objective statistical analysis. It doesn't bring community voice. So there's very little subjective measurement, except for them subjective measurement is are you happy? What's your social capital, etc. It's not the conversation of how do we, and I've liked that also in tonight's presentation, how do we address problems, not solve problems. So I don't know, Renee, if that gives you enough detail, I'll put for you in the chat the link also to the portal, because I know Susan Renner is playing around with it, because we've also taken that measurement and the different types of scholarship that you are engaged with in society. We've taken it now that it became a faculty promotion tool. So it creates an e-portfolio for you, and that community engagement is now seen as engaged scholarship in all forms of scholarship, and not as a standalone or addition to or some doing good or anchor institution approach, which is wrong. It must become a principle. It must become an ethos. So.
That's awesome. We are so glad you came today, Cornell. You brought so much to this conversation. You can hear all the ties in action in terms of the work that you're doing. So that's awesome. We haven't heard from you, Suzanne. Do you want to add your thoughts to the conversation?
Well, I would just say that this is fantastic. I think the clarity of how all of you are laying out not only the process but the challenges is just fantastic. I've been taking notes. But I want to go back for a moment and talk about transdisciplinarity, because I don't, Mary may know this, but I'm not sure the others of you do. But 2 years ago, we were asked by the State Department, I was asked for our department to be part of a pilot on how to include students in how to rebuild Ukraine once the bombing stopped. And we were asked to select a city. It was late in the day, literally in the summer before the fall semester, of course. Classes had been set. And so I picked a city that was very much the size and scope of where we're located, Charlottesville. I thought no students would be interested. I cut it off at 24. And then that's one thing. The second thing was I got so much advice from the architects and the landscape architect. I mean, everybody had advice. So my approach was to follow the student's lead. And in my years of teaching and working in communities, I've never seen people embrace, and I want to conclude with this, the students embrace their task, but also, given the situation, the space between, if you will, the lack of information, everything they did and proposed, which we were fortunate to present it to the Ukrainian ambassador, was all about what the community might think. So instead of graduate students or undergraduate students only thinking about what they thought, they did all the basic research, but they left open and actually created this guidebook for engaging the community, how the community could be engaged with the knowledge that they were presenting, to get back to one of your tenets, community knowledge. Now, I'm going to end with my question. It's not easy to do that even in one school in a university. In our case, architecture with 5 disciplines. How do you begin to light the fire? And I'm asking this to all of you, across a whole university around an issue like poverty or climate change, or, fill in the blanks. So let me stop there. So thank you all very much. It's just fantastic.
So Scott, maybe we can try to shoehorn some of the stuff that we didn't talk about today. And what you are describing, Suzanne, is core to some of the things we're interested in. Doing transdisciplinary work across a university-wide, is difficult. There are barriers, there are pinch points. The tenure promotion processes are not favorable at all. Getting the coursework to be transdisciplinary is difficult because you get 4 or 5 professors and other experts from the community involved. Who gets credit for it? I mean, the tradition is we get 3 hours credit. Okay, well, how do you do that? Scott and I have come up with a couple of ways of overcoming these, and we've done it from our own experiences. One of the things that we've advocated for elsewhere is these are strategic academic units that can be created within a university. They can provide degrees, they can provide certificates. They are for students. They can also provide training, for instance, Hannah Love's work on how you build teamwork and how important teamwork is to transdisciplinarity. And teamwork includes communities. So maybe that could be another place that Scott and I can do our preaching to, and we're known as preachers, I think. So Suzanne, what you're raising is the core issue. There are things we can do, but we have to be intentional. We have to look at the pinch points in universities. There are also some in the communities, but right now, from my perspective, the university is more of a barrier to these transdisciplinary and community engagement efforts.
I would just add 3 things before we begin to wrap this up from my own experiences, which are similar to Lou's. And one is there are maybe a handful of universities that have taken their extension service university-wide. And what that has done is helped to rub off the public service ethos in some other university units where it may not have been so pronounced. A second idea is what we use to establish a community engagement council that's university-wide, and it uses change agents from every college who can sit on this council and then go back home and help to inspire change. And then finally, Suzanne, I would say we need to reward failures. One of the last things I did in my role is we gave an annual best failure award in order to inspire people to take risks. And all those things together, I think, helped move my university in directions it may not have otherwise. So having said that, before we close, I think there's an opportunity to act that Renee wants to describe.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. This has been an amazing conversation, and we engage in conversations for the purposes of taking action. One of the things that we have done, in our group as ACEs, we introduced the strategy discipline of strategic doing, and Lou and Scott helped form the first action team, and have identified this area of hosting community-centered issues forums to help us get to the place where we've got really clearly defined opportunities and things of that nature that we can move forward. And so we're extending the opportunity to ACE members to join in. If we're having we're having a meeting on the 12th. They're actually work sessions. They're not really meetings. We check in on the work that we've done. We talk about what do we need to do next so that we're always staying in action. So if you're listening to this and you're interested in taking a closer look at the way we're taking action in ACEs as teams, and also to learn and hear a little bit more of what that actually looks like in practice with Lou and Scott, and a couple of other people really bringing to focus on the transdisciplinary and the societal engagement parts of it, we invite you to join us on the 12th of June. Depending on where you are, it's 2 p.m. in the Pacific, 3 p.m. Mountain Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm not sure, Cornell, what time it is where you are, but feel free, hope you can join us as well. And feel free to reach out to us to request, the invite to that meeting, and also to just ask additional questions if something came up that you have further interest in today and we didn't get to it in the time that we had allowed. And we want to just thank you. We want to thank you for taking the time to be here. as we set out to do the work of ACEs, which is to not only to recognize us as leaders, but to begin to do the work of bringing benefit back into the communities where we all live, right? So we want to thank you for joining us today for this coffee hour. We want to thank Mary Lucy, who is our host of all of our coffee hours. Did we just show her a little love today? Yes, yes, yes. We want to thank you, who as the co-chair of our membership committee, creating a space for us to be able to invite each other to come and talk and hear and have conversation and move to action. So thank you all very much.